Hello, Void Dwellers. Of all the stupid conspiracy theories out there, the one that bugs me the most on a personal level is the people who claim that Kurt Cobain didn't commit suicide, but instead Courtney Love killed him or had him killed. And it bugs me on two levels. One, I'm a 90s kid. Cobain is one of my heroes, and to this day I have a picture of him hanging on my wall, right next to Inbal Perlmutter, an Israeli rock icon who was also taken from us too early. And two, because I suffer from depression myself, and I was suicidal several times in my life, it bugs me to see people dismiss it, because Cobain was a textbook suicidal. All those people who say he was quitting music, not life, you have no idea what you're talking about. First of all, let's just put to rest some of the most obvious and constantly repeating claims by the conspiracy theorists. So let's set a scene. Kurt Cobain had a known heroin addiction and suffered from depression. Although I think in the 90s people didn't talk about it as much, it was far less known to the public. Let's break down his final days. On March 30, 1994, he checked into the Exodus Recovery Center in California. He did not want to go to rehab again, but did so under the pressure of Courtney, his manager, his bandmates, and his close friends. They pressured him after a nearly fatal overdose in Rome just weeks earlier. They thought it was a suicide attempt. He insisted it was an accident. They should have listened to their gut feeling. Kurt lasted less than 2 days at the place, and then, on the evening of April 1st, he climbed over a brick wall and disappeared. Later, it was discovered that he had boarded a flight back to Seattle under a false name. Now, at that point, Courtney hires the private detective Tom Grant to find him. Friends trying to reach him, and they can't, and Grant reports there were some unconfirmed sightings of him around Seattle. We don't really know what he was doing during those days, but I have a few guesses. Anyway, on April 8, his body was discovered in a greenhouse above his garage by an electrician arriving to install a security system. The coroner determined that he actually died on April 5th. The cause of death was a shotgun blast to the head. He had copious amounts of heroin in his system, and a suicide note was at his side. These are the undisputed facts. So, what are the main claims by the conspiracy theorists? They say that Courtney had killed him because he was going to divorce her and she would lose all of his money. They say that he had too much heroin in his body to operate the shotgun, and they say his suicide note is about quitting music and not life, and that the last part of it was added afterwards. Well, let's address those claims. First, it is worth pointing out that one of the main people to push the conspiracy theory is that private detective, Tom Grant himself. But it's also worth noting that it's not something he's doing for free. The guy made a booming business from Kurt's death. He's selling books, he's paid to give talks. In short, it is his business model to push this theory through. So anything the guy says should already be suspicious to people. Second, he had too much heroin in his system to operate the gun assumption is complete nonsense. Specialists have already confirmed it. It all depends on what kind of tolerance you develop to that poison. And Kurt had about a decade worth of experience with that crap. He took it as a painkiller for his chronic and probably psychosomatic stomach aches. He was shooting heroin and going to band practice while high. By the time of his death, he was very much capable of operating a shotgun while very high, especially if he prepared everything beforehand and all he needed to do was to pull it to his own head and then push on the trigger, which I imagine is exactly what he did. Then there's Courtney's motive. First, I love that some people say, well, she behaved very erratically the days before his death. No shit! Compared to what? When did you ever hear of Courtney Love not behaving erratically? And second, she was worried about her husband. How would you behave in that situation? And third, she begged him to go into rehab and hired a private eye to track him down when he escaped and disappeared. That does not sound to me like someone who wants him dead. That sounds to me like someone who is very much worried about him. And then there's the bullshit about his money. First of all, Courtney was already making money on her own with their band Hole and their acting career that was starting at the time. But more to the point, anyone who thinks that if they got divorced, she wouldn't have been granted at least half of everything that he owns after several years of marriage and a joint kid is a fucking kid themselves. Go talk to some divorced men. See if that ever happens, that the wife doesn't get anything. Fuck, financially speaking, he was probably worth more to her alive than dead, since she could probably get some ownership of future projects as well. So this series is just so stupid when you just look at the facts. I mean, just use Occam's razor for God's sake. What is simpler? That she wanted him in rehab and then hired a detective to find him because she was rightfully worried? Or that she wanted him in rehab so he'd escape so no one would know where he is, and she hired a detective because she knew he wouldn't be able to find him to cover her own tracks, and in the meantime paid someone to drug him and kill him, and then paid off police and the coroner and everyone who is involved so they could all be on this conspiracy to murder the most famous person in the world at the time. What the fuck? How do people even come up with this shit? But what really pisses me off is when they talk about the suicide note. Oh, he was just quitting music, not life. Let's have a look at the suicide note. We'll read it together here in full. To Boda. By the way, Boda is his imaginary friend from when he was a child. To Boda. Speaking from the tongue of an experienced simpleton who obviously would rather be an emasculated infantile complainee, this note should be pretty easy to understand. All the warnings from the Punk Rock 101 courses over the years, since my first introduction to the, shall we say, ethics involved with independence and the embracement of your community has proven to be very true. I haven't felt the excitement of listening to as well as creating music, along with reading and writing, for too many years now. I feel guilty beyond words about these things. For example, when we're backstage and the lights go out and the maniac roar of the crowds begin, it doesn't affect me the way in which it did for Freddie Mercury, who seemed to relish in the love and adoration from the crowd, which is something I totally admire and envy. The fact is, I can't fool you, any one of you. It simply isn't fair to you or to me. The worst crime I can think of would be to rip people off by faking it and pretending as if I'm having 100% fun. Sometimes I feel as if I should have a punching time clock before I walk out on stage. I've tried everything within my power to appreciate it, and I do, God, believe me, I do, but it's not enough. I appreciate the fact that I and we have affected and entertained a lot of people. It must be one of those narcissists who only appreciate the things when they're gone. I'm too sensitive. I need to be slightly numb in order to regain the enthusiasm I once had as a child. On our last 3 tours, I've had a much better appreciation for all the people I've known personally and as fans of our music, but I still can't get over the frustration, the guilt, and empathy I have for everyone. There's good in all of us, and I think I simply love people too much. So much that it makes me feel too fucking sad. The sad little sensitive, unappreciative Pisces Jesus man. Why don't you just enjoy it? I don't know. I have a goddess of a wife who sweats ambition and empathy, and a daughter who reminds me too much of what I used to be, full of love and joy, kissing every person she meets because everyone is good and will do her no harm. And that terrifies me to the point where I can barely function. I can't stand the thought of Frances becoming the miserable, self-destructive death rocker that I've become. I have it good, very good, and I'm grateful. But since the age of 7, I've become hateful towards all humans in general. Only because it seems so easy for people to get along that have empathy. Only because I love and feel sorry for people too much, I guess. Thank you all from the pit of my burning, nauseous stomach for your letters and concern during the past years. I am too much of an erratic, moody baby. I don't have the passion anymore, and so remember, it's better to burn out than fade away. Peace, love, empathy. Kurt Cobain. And now the part that people think was added. Francis and Courtney, I'll be at your altar. please keep going, Courtney, for Frances, for her life, which will be so much happier without me. I love you, I love you. Now, I'll try not to be my usual angry self and give people who don't have depression or were never suicidal or never knew people with depression or were suicidal the benefit of the doubt. And I realized that people would want to believe that Kurt would never do this to them and someone had to take him away from them, because people are selfish that way after all. But this letter reads exactly like a classical suicide note, with all the warning signs to anyone with unfortunate experience. The totality of it, while still being inconsistent, all the warnings have proven to be true. I've tried everything within my power. I simply love people too much, followed by I've become hateful towards all humans in general. This all reads like giant red flags to me. And there's the fact that he addresses it to his imaginary childhood friend, Boda. That is him talking to the child version of himself. Why would he tell the child version of himself that he's quitting music? It's far more personal and far more final than that. And there's the constant self-deprecation, speaking from the tongue of an experienced simpleton who obviously would rather be an emasculated infantile complainee. The entire letter, he is blaming himself, saying something is wrong with him. He is a faker. He can't feel excitement. And that's another thing that is classically depression. When you feel like nothing gives you that happiness and anticipation you had as a child, or even as an adult. You don't get it anymore. Not from your art, not from hobbies, not even from the people you love. And then there's the ending, which the conspiracy theorists think was added by someone else. It wasn't, but it is an addition. It's an afterthought. The entire note was written before he shot up the heroin. That part was written as an afterthought when he was already high, probably seconds before he pulled the trigger. But to me, above all, the real smoking gun is everything that has led to the suicide in the months before it, starting with the album In Utero. That album is Kurt's suicide note, and I think he decided to kill himself when he was recording that album. Dave Grohl said they didn't know what the lyrics are going to be until Kurt recorded the singing tracks. In rehearsal, Kurt didn't use the actual lyrics. So, for example, the song Rape Me, they had no idea what that song is about. Why would Kurt do that? My guess, from personal experience, to avoid conversation about the lyrics while working on the songs. The entire album is full of suicidal imagery. The songs are very different from the ones on Nevermind or Bleach. They are darker, they are more visceral. There's tons of cancer and disease imagery, which commonly accompanies the way people with depression feel about themselves and the world. The very title of the album, In Utero, implies an illness you contracted as you were developing in the womb, something that is a part of you and you can never escape. He starts the album with the song Serve the Servants, which echoes his suicide letter, or rather the suicide letter kinda echoes that song. Teenage angst has paid off well, now I'm bored and old. Now I'm bored and old. That is the same exact sentiment as I don't have the passion anymore. The song Heart-Shaped Box, that people mistake for a love song because they see the title and don't think about the lyrics, is actually a very complicated and troubling song about his relationship with his mother. The continuous reference to cancer throughout this album is not cancer as in the disease itself literally, but as a symbolic disease that represents what is wrong with your essence, that eats you from the inside. In this song, Kurt is saying, I wish I could eat your cancer when you turn black. That is probably a reference to the abusive partner she had when she divorced Kurt's father. Kurt's relationship with his mother never recovered from that. He saw her getting beaten black and blue by her abusive boyfriend. She was even hospitalized once with broken ribs, and she still wouldn't leave him or even report him. Kurt saw that as something was fundamentally wrong with her, rotten within her. something that made her leave him, her child, and be by the side of this abusive monster. Him wanting to eat the cancer while in her is him wanting to make her better from the inside. But if he is in such a sick womb, that means also that it's stuck to him. And that's the entire point of In Utero. Kurt saw in his own behavior a reflection of his mother's behavior. He viewed himself as allowing himself to be abused by the world, to keep on doing things that he did not have passion for, that he did not have any joy in doing, but he let them all force him into doing it. And he felt fake, he felt like a traitor. His depression clouded everything. And then the closing song, All Apologies, reflects the feeling that all suicidal people have, that the world, this rotten and ugly and cancerous world, would still be better off without them. It's a song about feeling useless, about being the main reason everything bad is happening around that person. But in the sun I feel as one, in the sun, married, buried. That's a metaphor for death as well, the longing for death. And all in all is all we are. The ending sentence of the album reflects the feeling of meaningless and hopelessness. He is saying, we are nothing special. We are only what we can be. And all I can ever be is this damaged person. That's what I'll ever be. The Unplugged show they did afterwards was another part of the suicide note. It was a wake where the dead was allowed to participate. He chose for half the show to perform songs most people didn't know, covers by unknown bands. This was his, fuck it, this is all going to be over soon, so I might as well enjoy myself moment. And look at the subject matter of the songs he chose to cover, from The Man Who Sold the World to Lake of Fire. It's all about endings and death. This was not an attempt to make himself happier. This was something he did for himself, because he knew he was checking out. Even the stage was set to look like a wake, with those flowers and candles. So, sorry friends, but this is a classic case of someone who suffered from depression and was taken out by that disease. He didn't need rehab. He needed therapy. He probably needed to be on medication. I mean, he wrote a song called Lithium, and at the time that was sometimes used to battle depression, but it's a very potent drug that makes people feel like zombies, so it's not a good choice. I know he was on medication to battle his heroin addiction, but I don't know if he was ever on Prozac or something like that and gone through meaningful therapy. And even with people who do that, depression sometimes wins anyway, like in the case of Chris Cornell. So it might not have helped. In the end, the real cancer is depression. People think it's a, oh, I'm sad today condition. No, it's not. It's a disease. It makes you irrational and unable to enjoy anything in life. It eats at you like cancer, and it does kill some people who have the disease. In the end, I don't even think Kurt Cobain killed himself. I think the disease killed him. Kurt Cobain was an amazing talent, one of my all-time favorite poets, and just a pure soul all around. And it's tragic that it ended the way that it did, but that's the world we live in. All in all is all we are.